Second, the absolute ultimate display of power. And I don't mean, a billionaire buying a social media platform or a country hosting the Olympics. I'm talking about a party,
Right.
but not just any party, a party that lasts for 180 days.
That's half a year.
Exactly. Half a year. 6 months of open bars, golden couches, and just massive geopolitical flexing. All of it capped off by a week-long bender that, it nearly destroys an entire dynasty.
It really sounds like fiction, doesn't it? But this is exactly where our source materials take us today. We're looking at one of the most cinematic openings in ancient literature.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today we're tackling a fascinating study guide on the biblical book of Esther, specifically looking at the first 2 chapters. And if you're listening right now and you think this is just a nice Sunday school story about a beauty pageant, you are in for a very serious surprise.
Absolutely. Because when you actually peel back the layers of the text and look at the historical context provided in the notes we're using today, this reads a lot more like a season of House of Cards.
Right.
Or Game of Thrones.
Right.
It is a high-stakes political thriller.
It really is. I mean, we have a geopolitical crisis that gets sparked by a refusal to show up to a party. We've got a government-mandated human trafficking operation disguised as a pageant.
Yeah.
And a secret agent, a secret queen, really planted right in the heart of the Persian Empire.
And underneath all of that drama, the study materials we're looking at point to a much deeper theme, which is the concept of providence.
Yes.
The idea that there is this hidden hand moving the chess pieces around the board, even when it looks to us like total chaos.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack all of this for you. We're going to look at King Ahasuerus, who history knows by a slightly different name, the fall of Queen Vashti, and the really dark, complex road that leads Esther to the throne.
It's a story about power, pride, and just impeccable timing.
Let's start with the man at the top. The text calls him Ahasuerus. But the notes here make a very strong historical identification. Who are we actually dealing with here?
So most historians and biblical scholars agree that Ahasuerus is the historical figure Xerxes I.
Okay.
He's the 4th king of the Persian Achaemenid Empire, and he reigned from around 486 to 465 BC. And to understand the stakes of this story, you really have to understand the scale of his operation.
Because the text says he ruled 127 provinces, from India all the way to Ethiopia.
Which was effectively the entire known world at the time. This was the superpower. And the story opens in Shushan, or Susa, at the Citadel, which was his winter palace.
And from the descriptions, it was a total masterpiece of architecture.
Unmatched wealth.
Yeah.
And he decides to throw this massive event. 180 days.
I've planned events that felt long, but 6 months. The study guide mentions this wasn't just about hospitality, was it?
No, not at all. And this is a key insight from our source. You don't feed the governors, the nobles, and the military leaders of 127 provinces for half a year, just because you're a nice guy.
Right.
If you look at the timeline, the text says this is the 3rd year of his reign, so around 483 BC. This corresponds perfectly with Xerxes preparing for his massive invasion of Greece.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this isn't just a party. This is a war council.
It's a war council disguised as a festival. It's an elaborate psychological operation. He's showing off the, quote, riches of his glorious kingdom to prove to his generals and his financial backers that he can afford this war.
Ah, I see.
He's saying, look at this gold, look at this food.
Yeah.
We have the resources to crush the Greeks.
It's a flex. He's securing their loyalty through sheer awe.
Exactly. And the sensory details in the text completely back this up. It's not just nice decor.
Yeah.
The study guide highlights things like white and blue linen curtains, silver rods, marble pillars.
And the beds. It mentions gold and silver couches on a mosaic pavement made of alabaster, turquoise, and black marble.
Right. Which is insane. In the ancient world, reclining on a couch to eat was a sign of extreme luxury.
And doing it on gold and silver.
Exactly. That's unheard of. This is the absolute peak of Persian opulence.
So these 6 months of strategic planning and partying wrap up. And then he throws a 7-day banquet specifically for the locals, for everyone in Shushan. And the text says the wine was flowing according to the generosity of the king.
Which is a polite way of saying it was bottomless.
Bottomless drinks for a week.
Yeah.
And this is where the wheels completely come off. Because on the 7th day, the king is described as being merry with wine.
Yes. Which is a very polite biblical way of saying he was completely hammered.
Right.
His judgment is totally compromised at this point. And in this intoxicated state, he decides he wants to show off one last prized possession.
His wife. Queen Vashti.
He commands his 7 eunuchs to bring Vashti out, quote, wearing her royal crown, to show the people and the princes her beauty.
And she refuses. Now, I want to dig into this because the notes offer a couple of theories on why she said no. Because realistically, it was a death sentence to defy the king. Was she just tired of the noise?
It's likely a lot more than that. The text specifically says he wanted her wearing her royal crown. Now, there is a very old Jewish tradition, which is referenced in our study materials, that suggests the drunken king was ordering her to come wearing only her royal crown.
Whoa. Okay, that completely changes the dynamic.
It's the extreme interpretation, sure. But even if we look at the more conservative historical view, the consensus is that he at least wanted her unveiled.
Which is a big deal.
A massive deal. In Persian culture, for a high-ranking woman, especially the queen, to parade her beauty before a huge crowd of drunken men would have been a catastrophic breach of dignity and protocol. It was considered culturally shameful.
So she's basically in a double bind here. If she goes, she debases herself and disrespects the office of the queen. But if she stays, she defies the most powerful man on earth.
Exactly. And she chooses her dignity. She refuses. And that sends Xerxes into an absolute rage.
And this is where the scene turns into a bit of a dark comedy for me, reading through the guide. The king turns to his wise men, his legal experts, and asks, "What do we do?" And their reaction, it honestly sounds like pure panic.
It is total insecurity. You have the most powerful men in the world sitting in a room, and they are terrified. One of them, Momukin, basically steps up and says, "King, this is a disaster. If word gets out that the queen said no, then every woman in the 127 provinces is going to stop listening to her husband."
It's the ultimate slippery slope argument. If Vashti gets away with this, there will be total anarchy in every household, from India to Ethiopia.
They literally frame it as a threat to the global social order. They are terrified of, quote, excessive contempt and wrath in their own homes, so they propose a nuclear option.
Right. They don't just ground her or reprimand her, they erase her.
They advise the king to issue a royal decree that Vashti is to be deposed. She can never come before the king again, and her royal position will be given to someone better.
But the critical part here, and this is a concept the study guide emphasizes because it matters for the rest of the book, is the legal mechanism they use, the law of the Medes and Persians.
Yes.
Now, I've heard this phrase used as an idiom for something that just can't be changed.
That is exactly where the idiom comes from. In the Persian legal system, once a decree was written in the king's name and sealed with his signet ring, it was irrevocable. Not even the king himself could alter it.
Which seems like a massive design flaw in a legal system. Why would you purposefully tie your own hands like that?
It was all about the projection of divinity. The Persian king was seen as a godlike figure. If he admitted he made a mistake or changed his mind, it implied he wasn't perfect. Therefore, his word had to be eternal and unchangeable.
Even if his word was given while he was completely drunk and angry.
Precisely. And our source connects this inflexibility to what we see later in the biblical book of Daniel, with the lion's den. It's the same legal trap. The study guide points out the tragedy here. Xerxes acts on impulse, seals the decree, and then wakes up the next morning alone. He has legally checkmated himself.
It really highlights the danger of unchecked power mixed with alcohol. So Vashti is out. The decree goes out to every province, essentially telling men to be the master of their own house, which, let's be honest, probably just spread the gossip about the king's embarrassment to everyone who hadn't heard it yet.
Well, it likely had the exact opposite effect of what they wanted. It just broadcast the king's humiliation to the entire empire.
So now we have a vacancy on the throne. And if you're just reading the chapters quickly, you might think, okay, next day, let's find a new queen. But the timeline provided in the historical tables of our notes points out a huge gap here.
A massive gap.
Yeah.
Chapter 1 ends in the 3rd year of his reign. Chapter 2 begins in the 7th year.
That is a 4-year silence. What was happening in those 4 years?
History fills in the blanks for us. Remember that war council we talked about? Those 4 years are when Xerxes actually went to war with Greece. This is the era of the Battle of Thermopylae, the famous 300 Spartans, and the naval disaster at Salamis.
Wait, so he goes to war with all those resources and he loses?
He suffers a humiliating defeat. His navy is crushed. He comes home to Shushan with his tail between his legs, his treasury depleted, and his grand ambitions completely shattered.
Wow, that context changed everything about how Chapter 2 starts. He's not just a guy looking for a wife. He's a defeated, broken man looking for comfort.
Exactly. The text says he remembered Vashti. He's lonely. He probably regrets firing her. But because of that law of the Medes and Persians, he can't bring her back. He is trapped by his own pride.
So his servants, seeing him moping around the palace, suggest a solution. They say, let's get all the beautiful young women in the empire and bring them here.
And this is often portrayed in pop culture as a beauty pageant, sort of like Miss Universe. But the study guide rightly identifies it as a levy. It's a draft.
A draft.
Yes. Officers were appointed in every single province to gather. And the word literally means seize beautiful young virgins.
That's terrifying. If you were a father in that era, you'd be hiding your daughters.
Absolutely. Being taken into the king's harem wasn't necessarily a dream come true for these families. It was a golden cage. You belonged to the king. And the preparation process described in the text is intense. 12 months of purification.
Yeah, the notes mention 6 months with oil of myrrh and then 6 months with perfumes. Why take an entire year just to get ready to meet the king?
Well, part of it is just the sheer excess of Persian culture. Everything had to be over the top. But some scholars suggest it was also about stripping away their past identity.
Oh, wow.
You spend a year in the spa, learning court etiquette, forgetting your village, forgetting your family. You were essentially being remade into a Persian object.
And right into this massive machinery steps our protagonist. Or rather, 2 of them.
Right. We meet Mordecai first. The notes give us his genealogy, identifying him as a Jew living in Shushan, a Benjamite, a descendant of Kish.
Which connects him all the way back to the first king of Israel, King Saul.
Yes, and it also connects him to the exile. His family was among the captives taken from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar way back in 597 BC. So he is part of the Jewish diaspora living right in the heart of the Persian Empire.
And he's raising his cousin Hadassah.
Better known by her Persian name Esther. She's an orphan. The text says she had neither father nor mother, so Mordecai took her in as his own daughter. And the only thing the text tells us about her at this early stage is that she was lovely and beautiful.
Which, as we just established with the draft, puts a huge target on her back.
It does. Esther is swept up in this dragnet. She's taken to the citadel and placed under the custody of Haggai, who is the keeper of the women.
Now, this is the part that fascinates me. Before she goes into the palace, Mordecai gives her a very specific instruction. He tells her not to reveal her people or her family.
Right. Don't tell them you're Jewish.
Why the secrecy?
It's a survival tactic. While Jews were generally tolerated in the Persian Empire, they were still a minority group with different customs, different laws, and a different god. In a highly competitive, high-stakes environment like the harem, being the quote-unquote other could be a major disadvantage.
Makes sense.
Or Mordecai, being a shrewd observer of court politics, might have already sensed an undercurrent of anti-Semitism that wasn't fully public yet.
The study guide calls this a real mark of wisdom on Esther's part. It even connects it to the idea of being slow to speak. She keeps her cards very close to her chest.
She does, and it works brilliantly. She wins over Haggai almost immediately. He fast-tracks her. He gives her the best food, the best servants. She has this intangible quality, this favor that just draws people to her.
So the time passes. The text gives us a specific date. It's the 10th month of the 7th year, so that's 479 BC. The Greek war is over, the king is back, and Esther's turn finally arrives.
And the text is incredibly clear about the result. It says, the king loved Esther more than all the other women. She wins his favor and approval, and she is crowned queen in Vashti's place.
Talk about a meteoric rise. From an orphan girl in an exile community to the queen of the known world.
It's a Cinderella moment. But the study guide is quick to remind us, this isn't a fairy tale.
Right.
She is now sitting right in the center of Viper's Nest.
Yeah.
And almost immediately after she's crowned, the genre of the story shifts from romance back to a spy thriller.
Yeah, the assassination plot. So Mordecai is hanging out at the king's gate.
Which, by the way, implies he actually had an official position. Sitting in the gate usually meant you were a judge or some sort of minor official. He wasn't just loitering on the sidewalk outside the palace.
That's a great detail. And while he's there, he overhears 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, plotting to assassinate Xerxes.
Which completely tracks historically. The king just came back from losing a massive, expensive war. People are unhappy. Assassination attempts were very common when an ancient king showed weakness.
So Mordecai hears the plot, and he tells Esther, and Esther tells the king, but, and the notes say this is crucial, she tells him in Mordecai's name.
She doesn't take the credit for herself. She ensures Mordecai is explicitly identified as the source of the intel.
So the plot is investigated, it's proven true, the 2 guys are hanged, and then nothing.
Nothing happens.
Yeah.
That is the detail the study guide really hammers home. Oh. Does Mordecai get a medal? Does he get a promotion or money? No. It is simply written down in the Book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. It gets filed away in a dusty government archive.
That feels so unjust when you read it. The guy literally saved the king's life.
It feels very unjust to us, and it probably felt incredibly frustrating to Mordecai at the time. But this is where the deep dive into the theology of the book gets really interesting, because the guide argues that this lack of a reward is actually a critical plot device.
How so?
Think about it from a storytelling perspective. If Mordecai had been rewarded right then and there, say he was given a pile of gold or a new house, the debt would be paid, the transaction would be closed.
Okay, I follow.
By not rewarding him, the universe, or God, leaves that account open. It's like a loaded gun sitting on the table, just waiting to be used in Act 3.
I see. It's a setup.
Exactly. And this brings us to the core synthesis of our source material today, the theology of providence.
The hidden hand.
Yes. If you read the Book of Esther, you might notice something very peculiar about it compared to the rest of the Bible. It is the only book that doesn't explicitly mention the name of God, not even once.
Really? That seems entirely counterintuitive for a holy text.
It's totally intentional. The author's style forces the reader to do the work. It asks you to look at the events and connect the dots yourself.
Let's look at those dots again then, because when you list them out, it gets pretty spooky how it all lines up.
Start with Vashti. Her refusal to appear at the banquet happens 4 years before Esther is even needed. But if she doesn't refuse, there's no vacancy on the throne.
Right, and then the war. The king's defeat leaves him lonely and vulnerable, which creates the emotional need for a new wife.
Then look at the timing of the draft. Esther is chosen and elevated to queen just before the ultimate villain of the story, Haman, who we haven't even met yet, rises to power to threaten the Jews.
And the fact that Mordecai just happened to be sitting at the gate at the exact right time to hear an assassination plot.
And the fact that the Persian bureaucracy failed to reward him, leaving that massive favor banked for a later date when he's really going to need it.
It's like watching a huge row of dominoes falling, but the first domino was pushed years before the crisis even started.
The study guide references the book of Romans here, specifically Romans 8.28, the idea that all things work together for good. But it applies it historically to this narrative. It points out that God placed Esther in the palace before the threat to her people even existed.
Wow.
The rescue swimmer was already in the water before the boat even started to sink.
That is such a powerful perspective, because when you're actually living through those events, if you're Vashti getting publicly fired, or if you're Mordecai watching your beloved cousin get dragged away by armed soldiers to the king's harem, it doesn't look like a master plan. It looks like a total disaster.
Precisely. If you froze the frame at the end of chapter 1, it's just a tragedy about a broken marriage and an impulsive king. If you freeze the frame in the middle of chapter 2, it's a tragedy about a young girl losing her freedom and her identity.
Yeah.
But our source argues that you have to view the full story to see the orchestration. You can't judge the narrative by a single isolated event.
It really challenges our modern idea of coincidence.
It suggests that what we call coincidence is often just providence that wishes to remain anonymous.
So bringing this all down to earth for us today, what is the ultimate takeaway? Because obviously most of you listening aren't trying to become the Queen of Persia, and you probably aren't stopping ancient assassination plots.
The application the guide offers is really about how we judge the chapters of our own lives. We have a tendency to judge our entire life story by the current difficult chapter we happen to be in.
We get stuck on that Vashti's deposed moment, that moment of loss or extreme confusion or just waiting.
Right, we feel the disappointment heavily. But the overarching lesson of Esther chapters 1 and 2 is that those confusing, painful events might be the necessary setup for something you can't even see yet.
We are judging the entire parade by the one single float that is passing right in front of us, but we can't see the whole route.
Exactly. The waiting period, that 4-year gap of silence, that intense 12-month preparation process, it wasn't wasted time. It was strategic positioning.
It's fascinating to think that the silence of God in this particular book is actually its loudest message. He's not speaking from a burning bush or parting a sea. He is moving in the mundane paperwork, the insomnia, the bad decisions of a drunk king.
It is a very modern kind of theology, honestly. It fits our world perfectly, where we don't often see blatant miracles, but we do see doors opening and closing in ways we just can't explain.
Before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a very specific thought from the source material that really stuck with me.
What's that?
So the phrase "for such a time as this" is incredibly famous. It comes a bit later in the Book of Esther. But the guide argues that the actual placement of Esther on the throne happened years in advance of that time.
That is a very profound distinction. The preparation always precedes the purpose.
So here is the question for you listening right now. What if the frustration you are feeling today, or the weird detour your career just took, or the waiting room you feel like you're sitting in, what if that is actually the stage setting for something massive?
What if you are being positioned right now for a time that hasn't even arrived yet?
That is the ultimate question of providence. And that is exactly where we're going to leave you today.
It's certainly a lot to think about.
It really is. Thanks for diving deep with us. Keep asking questions, keep digging into the sources, and we will see you on the next one. So, imagine for a second the